7 years ago, the world faced a terrible disaster called the Dungeon Break. Monsters poured into our world through a gate from the monster dimension. Many people, including Han Sung-yoon's parents, tragically lost their lives that day. Han Sung-yoon felt like he had lost everything. He made a promise with tears in his eyes that he would become a hunter and defeat those monsters. But now, 7 years later, Han Sung-yoon sat in the Destruction Memorial Park, feeling downcast. He had just been kicked out of the Hunter Training Center. The head coach had announced in front of everyone that Han Sung-yoon was no longer welcome there. The chairman claimed that most awakened individuals only needed a few months of training, and then they became hunters. But Han Sung-yoon had been at the training center for 7 long years. The chairman even went so far as to say that Han Sung-yoon's talent was worse than trash. He had been kicked out to preserve the center's reputation. Han Sung-yoon was stunned and hurt by this sudden rejection. He remembered the cruel words of his colleagues who had always mocked him. They saw him as a loser who couldn't improve his skills in 7 years, and it infuriated him. As Han Sung-yoon brooded over his situation, he overheard a conversation between a small child and their mother. The mother asked how the child's father had died, and the little girl proudly replied that her father had died saving people. The mother gently asked what the child would do if they faced a similar situation in the future. The little girl confidently said she would be strong and never give up. This conversation had a profound impact on Han Sung-yoon. It was like a splash of cold water awakening him. He approached the mother and child, bowing deeply as a sign of respect. Then, with determination in his heart, he decided not to give up. After 7 years of relentless effort, Han Sung-yoon knocked on someone's door. It was the residence of the training ground master, and he had come to beg for another chance, even if it meant taking the hunter exam once more. Han Sung-yoon was not ready to give up. Even the chairman was furious. He glared at Han Sung-yoon with bloodshot eyes and cursed at the young man. The chairman thought Han Sung-yoon was acting this way because he didn't want to lose his money. But Han Sung-yoon was quick to explain that it wasn't about the money. He'd been beaten so badly that he ended up on a pile of trash, wearing a painful expression. The chairman didn't hold back and called Han Sung-yoon a loser and trash before storming away, leaving the young man alone in the pouring rain. Han Sung-yoon's situation was dire. He sat among the dirty trash, drenched by the relentless rain. Han Sung-yoon really wished he had a unique talent or at least something to set him apart. Suddenly the system appeared and praised Hansen for his iron will. He was stunned by the notification, and just as he was processing it, the puddle of water at his feet deepened and swallowed him up. Han Sung-yoon cried out for help, but it was too late by the time the chairman rushed out. The young man had vanished from his spot. Han Sung-yoon found himself in a strange dimension, feeling submerged. He wasn't even out of breath when he reached a waterless dimension. The system informed him that the Tower of Trial had chosen him as a suitable candidate from Earth. The shock continued as he was asked to choose a difficulty level for a corresponding reward. Before we continue, take a moment to answer the question of the day. What is an overrated manhwa in your opinion? Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out. Now back to the recap. Confused but determined, Han Sung-yoon decided not to back down. His instincts guided him as he made his choice. In an instant he was transported to the first floor of the Tower of Trial, and it was an arid, scorching desert. He was handed a sword as his weapon, and the system promised a unique trait as a reward. Han Sung-yoon was overjoyed. A unique trait was something he had longed for over these 7 years. But just as he was about to reach for the sword, the sand beneath his feet began to stir, and a colossal sand golem emerged as his formidable opponent. Han Sung-yoon was dumbfounded, looking up at the towering, terrifying figure. Despite his shock, the system granted him 9 minutes to either survive or defeat the golem. Han Sung-yoon, still trying to comprehend the situation, could only run as the massive golem raised its leg, barely evading its colossal foot before the crushing impact reached his chest. The system gave a chilling announcement. Failing this trial meant certain death. Han Sung-yoon had no choice but to keep running away from the menacing golem. He questioned whether he could outpace this massive creature with its surprisingly swift movements. Running continuously for 9 minutes was pushing his feeble stamina to the limit. Clutching his sword tightly, he realized he couldn't escape by running forever. As he glanced back at the pursuing golem, Han Sung-yoon made a tough decision. He had to fight back, or at least try. The golem always seemed ready to stomp him into oblivion. It was then that Han Sung-yoon remembered the hurtful words of those who had looked down on him. He felt like they were giant golems ready to crush him. Determination welled up inside him, and he knew he couldn't go down without a fight. Han Sung-yoon turned and sprinted toward the nearest sand dune, recalling tactics he had learned over the years. His goal was to destroy the core, the life core, of the monster. Typically, these cores were challenging to reach, so Han Sung-yoon had to head up a steep hill. With the golem hot on his heels, Han Sung-yoon seized the opportunity. He kicked the golem, sending it tumbling down the hill. Landing near its core, he struck the reddish stone with all his might, hoping it would shatter. To his surprise, it held up longer than he expected. Just as he was about to strike again, the golem realized the threat and clutched him, causing excruciating pain. In this dire moment, Han Sung-yoon remembered the scornful looks of those who had insulted him. His determination surged once more. With a blood-stained arm, he raised his sword and, amidst discordant voices echoing in his ears, hurled it with all his might at the monster's core. The golem let out a tortured scream, just as the system flashed a message. "You have succeeded in destroying the monster's core." The sand golem shattered, and Han Sung-yoon fell. The young man stared at the sand in disbelief. He never expected to defeat a single opponent. But now, finally, a smile appeared on Han Sung-yoon's face, even though his body was covered in wounds. The system congratulated Han Sung-yoon for completing the task and rewarded him with valuable points and a fast recovery skill. It was amazing to Han Sung-yoon, who had worked hard for 7 years and endured insults. Now, he had become a hunter. But he knew that he could only enjoy these rewards if he could stay alive. Suddenly, a reddish-black mist emerged from where the golem had been. Han Sung-yoon was astonished and about to touch it when the system asked if he wanted to absorb the spirit from the golem. Without hesitation, Han Sung-yoon pressed yes. The mist slowly entered his body, and when it was done, the system congratulated him again. Now, he had a fifth soul. With his eyes closed, Han Sung-yoon could feel the spirit within him. He realized he could store a spirit if he absorbed it quickly. He tried to use the power of the spirit, and instantly his strength and health increased significantly. It was a bewildering experience, feeling his body brimming with energy. Han Sung-yoon was relieved that his stats had increased. He had struggled to improve them despite his hard training. The system appeared again and explained his unique trait. He could absorb the spirits of dead monsters and use them at will, and it could permanently increase his stats. Han Sung-yoon smiled as he absorbed all this information. Then a portal appeared, and the system instructed him to wait in a waiting room. Despite his doubts, he stepped into the portal, feeling he had no other choice. In the new room, the severe wounds on his body magically healed on their own. He's back as fit as ever. Of course, Han Sung-yoon was shocked to see this. Even so, he still stepped towards the bed in the room to rest his body for a while. As he lay in silence, Han Sung-yoon began to wonder if he could really get out of this mysterious tower. This young man still wonders why this tower chose him. Han Sung-yoon suddenly woke up as he remembered something. Han Sung-yoon gave an order to the system to reveal the information about the trial. Then came the time indicating 23 hours remaining to go to the next challenge. Han Sung-yoon was not surprised to find that there were still challenges from the other trials. At this time, a chat room appeared, which contained many other members chatting with each other about the trial and so on. While Han Sung-yoon was busy analyzing the contents of the conversation, the admin suddenly came in and provided important information. Points were like the currency in this tower of trial. Without a point, they would not get a drop of water. Han Sung-yoon was dumbfounded while reading the information, especially when the admin said that points could only be obtained after completing the trial. Han Sung-yoon stumbled through the information. He imagined a parched body without water, having to keep running to finish the trial to get points to buy water. Han Sung-yoon rubbed his face in frustration. He thought he might become a hunter as soon as he left that place. Finally, Han Sung-yoon glanced at the sword by the bedside and realized he couldn't last long with just one sword. So Han Sung-yoon opened a store to buy a few more items. Han Sung-yoon bought a small shield and started training with it and his sword. Han Sung-yoon was aware that all hunters would find it easier to learn skills that had already been learned. That's why Han Sung-yoon could not get over the fact that he was still farther from the starting line than others. So, he kept training in order to catch up with the others. Exhausted from training, Han Sung-yoon laid out on the floor. The young man's body glowed with the healing effect of the waiting room, which instantly healed his wounds and returned Han Sung-yoon's body to its original state of health. With this, Han Sung-yoon was excited to continue training. Suddenly, this young man's stomach growled with hunger. Han Sung-yoon quickly opened the system's inventory and retrieved the food he had bought earlier. But as he did, he realized that his remaining 40 points had been spent on items like weapons and water. Han Sung-yoon needed to earn more rewards to feel at ease. It was the perfect time to start the next trial, with only 17 minutes left. At that moment, Han Sung-yoon noticed that the chat room, once lively with participants, had now become deserted. Everyone must have been preparing for the next trial. Initially, Han Sung-yoon had doubts about whether he could pass the next trial, but in the blink of an eye, his determination surged, and he was ready to conquer it. What will happen next? Find out next time by staying tuned for our future recaps. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great recaps.